Hello, welcome to PRSSA's PR Connection with Chybrenna Fitch-Minton. Today we're happy to have Professor Dr. Juan Mundel with us. He's a professor at DePaul University, and I, like many of you, may have had him for one class or another. I had him for Advertising 101. And Professor Mundel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. How are you doing?
I'm doing as well as we can in this atmosphere of whatever it is, COVID, fear.
Yeah.
Trying not to be like that. Dr. Mundel, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So thank you for giving me this space. I'm really excited to chat virtually with you guys, especially about this topic that I'm really passionate about. But yeah, as you know, I teach here at DePaul University. I'm in the advertising area, although I do have experience both in public relations and advertising. My passion evolved more into the advertising side, but I still really like the area of public relations, so I can speak to both. And before coming to DePaul, I worked in special events planning, international relations. I did fashion advertising. I did a little bit of everything. So I really like being in the classroom. It's one of the things that brings me joy, and unfortunately right now we're doing it all online, which is keeping me away from all of you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Mundel. We're glad to have you on behalf of PRSSA. So let's jump right into it. I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for PRSSA. And, I want to bring light into our industry and just glean from you and have you inform us a little bit about this question. In regard to diversity and inclusion, how do you think the public relations and advertising industry is doing? How do you think they're doing?
So today we're doing a lot better than we used to do a couple of years ago, but this is not to say that the situation is necessarily as equal as it should be to represent all minorities in public relations and advertising. There's two ways to look into this. The first one has to do with the effects of having very little diversity into the strategy side or the practitioner side. And the other one is how little diversity is also represented on TV and on advertisements and the products that we produce as professionals. And so in both cases, whenever there is very limited representation of diversity, what happens is the messages start losing authenticity and they don't really speak to us anymore. Now, as I was mentioning, when it comes to seeing the agency side or the practitioner side, we're seeing that there are minorities that are still not represented at the top levels. And this poses a problem because of cultural nuances, right? So if we don't ever have a CEO that is a woman, if we never have a creative director that is Latino or a woman, we're always missing out on these opportunities to express our different points of views, which ultimately allow us to produce better advertising or public relations materials. But in addition to that, it creates kind of like a weird situation at work where you are not necessarily motivated to try to keep going forward because you're not seeing anyone like you that is on the top that you can aspire to become that person. So unfortunately, while the industry keeps talking about the need to diversify, we still see that in most cases, whenever we're talking to senior positions, they're mostly white and they're mostly men. and the rest of ethnicities and the rest of the minorities and types of different minorities, as well as it could be sexual orientation or anything else, are also very limited. So unfortunately, we do still have a long way to go.
Okay. How do you think young PR professionals and advertising professionals can get in there and change that? What would you say would
So
be?
first, yeah, we need a series of things happening. The first one is we don't really get that many minorities that want to study public relations and advertising. And one of the reasons that we find that this happens is because me being a minority myself, you know, like when you're growing up, whenever you come from a disadvantaged background, what your parents want from you or of you is for you to be a doctor, but a medical doctor, or a lawyer, because they believe that these two professions are the only ones that are going to allow you to progress in society and to provide for your family. So we don't really grow up hearing people talk about, like, you can actually go and work in advertising if you're good on sales, right? Like, it's something that we don't get told. So then that impacts enrollment in universities. So for example, at DePaul, we do have quite a diverse population of students, but this is explained because we're in the heart of Chicago. This is not normal for public relations and advertising programs, especially in smaller cities in the country. And even more curious is the fact that in most universities, most programs for public relations and advertising are made up of women. And then when we go and look into who is running agencies, the people that are running it are always men, right? So we see that there's disparities in how this talent actually feeds the pipeline and how once they come out, they actually insert themselves into the workplace. So the first thing that I would want to say is to encourage everyone to continue searching for jobs, even though the initial search might actually be complicated. You know, we all get told no sometimes when we applied for jobs. I for sure had my fair share when I just got out of my undergrad of turned down interviews. And however, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be valuable for someone else. So rather than taking a job that is convenient, I would really want to encourage any student or that is in this call to actually pursue your dream and work in your dream profession, that in this case should be advertising and PR. Yeah, so I think that's how we get to the very first stages of the lack of diversity.
Okay. One last question, Professor. What tips and advice do you have for students to stand out and, you know, to get internship opportunities in their first jobs?
Yeah, so actually right now there's a lot of companies that are committing to diversity because finally the message has caught on that diversity means better products. So for example, for the Leo Burnett's internship, the associate's internships, they are committed to recruiting incoming class that is 82% diverse. So that's already a good way for you to have a heads up, trying to search for these positions that will allow you directly to have an opportunity. But second of all, if you really want to stand out, what you should do is actually show what makes you different, right? So in a public relations program or in an advertising program, what we see when it comes down to taking a look at portfolios is that many of the portfolios look exactly the same and they lack identity. So if you are a minority in any sort of way, rather than feeling that that might play against you, my advice is actually to exploit it and show how you're different. So, you know, like pictures, to have your own style on how you take photos or how you write your press releases or what you're saying in advertising, you know, your copy that you're writing. So normally, since advertising is normally produced by these majority groups that tend to be homogeneous and kind of are stuck in the same ways, anytime that you produce something new, it's going to stand out. So I really want you to I want to encourage you to search for what makes you different and to highlight that in your materials. It's at the end of the day, when you go to interview, it's about showing why you're valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us minorities struggle with everything, with either an economic disadvantage, or it could be issues with your family where you had to stay and, I don't know, take care of someone and then have to work at night. So we're used to making magic with very little resources. And I feel that that's something that you need to highlight. Whenever you are crafty, whenever you feel that your background can make you different, then you should definitely highlight this.
Okay, that's awesome, Dr. Mundel. Very refreshing, too, because sometimes, especially as when I was newer to the program, I've often worried about how am I going to fit in? How am I going to fit into this world? I really like what I'm seeing, and I enjoy all of my classes. I enjoy what I'm learning, but realistically, am I going to fit in? But it's cool to know that I don't necessarily have to fit in all of those ways. So
I have a student of mine at DePaul who was a non-traditional student. He was by far older than most of the mean age, I guess, at DePaul. And he also was worried that he wasn't going to be able to get a job after graduation. And regardless, he was able to get an amazing job, an amazing offer at a huge media agency. And so age, color, race, none of that matters if you can actually present yourself in a professional way, if you can show that you were engaged and that you really want to do it. At the end of the day, your resume doesn't tell me much about who you are. It doesn't tell me your race, your color, or anything. So if your CV or your resume stands out, I'll definitely pick it up out of a pile, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mundel. This has been a very, not just refreshing, but enriching interview. And I believe that our audience will really get a lot out of it. And I'm just so glad that you were able to take some time and come and sit with us today and talk to us. So again, thank you for coming today and being a guest on PR Connection.
All right, my pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.